Have you ever wondered why Japan has one of the longest life expectancies in the world? Why its cities stay remarkably clean without constant enforcement? Why a country once devastated by war rebuilt itself so steadily and effectively? And why behind all of that daily life still feels quiet, ordered, and intentional? It's not because of luck. It's not because of strict discipline. It's because of small habits, repeated quietly every day. This video shares 8 habits commonly found in everyday Japanese life. They are small, simple, and easy to overlook if you only glance at them. This is not about changing quickly, and it's not a story of transformation overnight. They are just very ordinary choices. When something small is done long enough, it begins to make a difference. Not immediately, but in a way that feels real and lasting. Because in Japan, progress doesn't need to be loud. If you're curious about how change is built from the smallest things, stay with the channel and let's begin. Kaizen. You may have thought that changing your life has to start with a big decision, a sharp turn, a clear moment of, from now on, everything will be different. But in Japanese culture, Kaizen begins somewhere else entirely, quieter, smaller. Kaizen means continuous improvement, simply becoming a little better today than you were yesterday, not to become someone else, just to avoid standing still. In everyday Japanese life, Kaizen is not a slogan on a wall. It shows up in factories, in offices, and in very ordinary moments. A chef slightly adjusts how he holds a knife. An employee rearranges a desk. An elderly person walks a few extra steps each morning. Change is so small that no one praises them, no one notices, but they are repeated every day. What makes Kaizen effective is not the size of the change, but its consistency. When an action is small enough, the brain doesn't resist. There's no pressure, no fear of failure. And without resistance, it becomes easier to continue. Time then does the rest of the work. Small improvements stack on top of each other, slowly but deeply. For you, Kaizen might be spending 2 extra minutes tidying your desk before bed, reading 1 more page, going to sleep 5 minutes earlier. Actions so small you don't need motivation to start. You don't need to change your whole life. Just gently adjust your direction each day. Kaizen reminds us that lasting change is rarely loud. It happens quietly, through small choices repeated long enough to shape who you become. Ikigai. There are mornings when you wake up without really knowing why the day should begin. Everything keeps moving, but something inside feels empty. Ikigai appears quietly at that point. Ikigai can be understood as a reason for living, a reason for being, or more simply, the thing that makes you want to open your eyes each morning without forcing yourself. In Japan, especially in Okinawa, Ikigai is not an abstract idea. People ask each other very naturally what makes today feel worth living. For many older people, it has nothing to do with careers or big achievements. It might be tending a small garden, passing on a familiar skill, meeting old friends once a week. Very ordinary things, but ones that show up consistently in daily life. Ikigai is powerful because it gives the mind an anchor. When there is a small reason to keep going, people are less likely to give up. The brain doesn't need grand motivation, it only needs a meaningful connection. And when someone feels useful, even in a modest way, their sense of vitality is sustained for longer. For you, Ikigai doesn't need to be discovered all at once. It can start by noticing what makes you forget time. A quiet morning habit, a small task you do well without needing recognition. Something simple enough that you want to repeat it tomorrow. Ikigai doesn't demand a big answer. Sometimes one reason, just enough to not give up today, is already enough to keep moving forward. Harahachibu. There is a very familiar moment during a meal. You're already full, but you take a few more bites anyway. Not because you're hungry, just because there's still food on the table. Harahachibu begins right at that moment. Harahachibu means eating until you are about 80% full. Not dieting, not strict control, just stopping a little earlier. In Japan, especially in Okinawa, Harahachibu is a gentle reminder said before meals. People say it out loud to remember. It's not a formal ritual, just part of everyday life. Meals are still complete, no one rushes. No one eats just to finish. Everything moves at a calm, unhurried pace. What makes Harahachibu effective is how the body works. The brain needs time to recognize fullness. If you eat until you feel full, the body has already taken in more than it needs. By stopping at 80%, you give your system space to adjust. No overload, no heaviness. Energy stays more stable after eating. For you, Harahachibu can be very simple. Eat a little more slowly. Put your utensil down between bites. Ask yourself whether you're still hungry or just eating out of habit. You don't need to change what you eat, only the rhythm. Harahachi. Bu isn't about eating less. It's about listening just enough. Enough for the body to feel lighter, and enough for the day to move forward without feeling heavy. Shinrin Yoku. There are moments when you feel tired without knowing exactly why. Not from working too hard. Just a heavy mind, a rushed rhythm, and no room to breathe. Shinrin Yoku comes from that very simple need. Shinrin Yoku means forest bathing. Forest bathing. Not as exercise, but as being fully present in nature. In Japan, Shinrin Yoku is not a long trip or a major getaway. It might be a slow walk in a park, a small path lined with trees. There is no goal, no step counting, no podcast playing. Just walking, noticing the leaves, listening to the wind, and letting the body reset its own pace. What makes Shinrin Yoku effective is the reduction of stimulation. When you step away from screens and noise, the nervous system rests. Heart rate slows. Breathing deepens without effort. The mind shifts from constant reaction to simple observation. And that state of doing nothing is often what allows the body to recover. For you, Shinrin Yoku doesn't require a deep forest, just a few minutes under trees, a shaded street, walking without your phone, sitting still and looking outward instead of inward. Small actions, but enough to create space. Shinrin Yoku reminds us that moving forward doesn't always require more effort. Sometimes it simply means stepping outside, slowing down, and letting nature do its quiet work. Wabi-sabis. There are moments when you look around and see that nothing is perfect. A small scratch, an unfinished task, a day that didn't go according to plan. Wabi-sabi begins right there. Wabi-sabi is the Japanese way of seeing beauty in imperfection, imperfect beauty. Beauty that exists because something is real, not because it is complete. In everyday Japanese life, wabi-sabi isn't a lofty philosophy. It shows up in an old teacup, a simple room, or a house shaped by time. People don't rush to hide signs of wear. They don't try to make everything new again. What has aged is seen as something that has lived. Wabi-sabi works because it eases the pressure to be right. When you stop chasing an ideal image, the mind becomes lighter. Less energy is spent on constant correction. There is less self-blame for not being good enough. And in that state, it becomes easier to keep going instead of giving up from exhaustion. For you, wabi-sabi might mean accepting a messy morning without judging yourself. Letting something be finished, even if it's imperfect, instead of not done at all. Keeping objects that still work, even if they no longer look new. Very small choices, but ones that reduce tension. Wabi-sabi doesn't teach resignation. It simply reminds us that life doesn't need to be smooth to be meaningful. Sometimes it's the small, rough edges that make the journey worth continuing. Gamen, there are moments when you're struggling, but you don't know who to talk to. Not because there's no problem, but because you choose to stay quiet and endure. Gamen appears naturally in moments like these. Gamen can be understood as enduring in silence, enduring with patience, not to suppress emotions, but to maintain calm when circumstances can't be changed right away. In Japanese life, gaman doesn't mean passive suffering. It shows in the way people wait in long lines without complaining, the way they remain orderly during disruptions, or how someone continues to do their job even when the day is clearly difficult. Gaman is not loud, it doesn't seek recognition, it's simply about not breaking under pressure. Gaman works because it prevents energy from being scattered. Constantly complaining or reacting intensely consumes a great deal of strength. But when you stay composed, you preserve your inner resources. Not to endure forever, but to wait for a more suitable moment. This kind of patience allows people to go farther without burning out. For you, gaman might mean not reacting immediately when emotions rise, taking a deep breath and letting things settle for a few minutes, finishing a hard task without needing to share your exhaustion right away. Very small actions, but ones that help you stay steady through the day. Gaman doesn't teach you to swallow everything. It simply reminds us that in certain phases of life, the greatest strength is remaining calm, so you can keep moving forward without hurting yourself along the way. Omoyari. There are very small actions that make you feel respected, even when nothing is said. Someone holding the elevator door. Words spoken just slowly enough. A moment of silence at the right time. Omoyari begins with things like that. Omoyari can be understood as consideration for others' feelings. Thoughtful consideration, offered without being asked and without the need to show it off. In everyday Japanese life, omoyari isn't a form of surface-level politeness. It appears in the habit of thinking one step ahead for others, lining up shoes neatly so the next person can take them easily, lowering your voice in shared spaces, not pushing forward even when no one is watching. These actions happen daily, almost unconsciously. Omoyari works because it reduces friction in relationships. When people place less emphasis on their own ego, shared spaces feel lighter. There is less tension, fewer misunderstandings. And that sense of psychological safety allows people to cooperate more easily, to live closer together without feeling drained. For you, omoyari can be very simple, replying to messages more clearly, even if not immediately, not interrupting when someone else is speaking, pausing to consider how your words might land on the other person. Small choices that take little time but create a feeling of being understood. Omoyari doesn't ask you to sacrifice yourself. It simply reminds us that when we pay a bit more attention to others, the world around us becomes easier to live in, and from there, moving forward feels lighter. Kintsugi. There are moments in life when everything feels cracked open. A relationship breaks. A plan fails. A version of yourself is no longer whole in the way it once was. Kintsugi begins in moments like these. Kintsugi is the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. Golden repair, not to hide the cracks, but to highlight them. In Japanese culture, broken objects are not automatically thrown away. A cracked bowl is carefully put back together. The fracture lines are not erased, they are traced with gold. And it is those very lines that make the piece unique. It carries the story of having fallen, having broken, and still being kept. Kintsugi works deeply because it changes how we see damage. When we stop trying to hide our cracks, we feel less shame about our past. The mind no longer wastes energy pretending everything is fine. Instead, we acknowledge what we've been through. And that acceptance allows recovery to be steadier and more honest. For you, kintsugi might mean not denying a difficult period you've lived through, admitting that you were tired, that you made mistakes, that something inside you broke, and then continuing to work, to live, without forcing yourself back into who you used to be. Just moving forward with the cracks still visible. Kintsugi doesn't claim that wounds are good. It simply reminds us that what has been broken doesn't have to be discarded. Sometimes it's through the cracks that the light begins to enter. Looking back at these 8 habits, one thing becomes very clear. They don't ask you to make drastic changes. They don't require huge determination, and they don't expect you to become a different person overnight. They simply ask you to pay a little more attention to what you're doing each day. In Japan, change is not seen as something that needs to be rushed. Time is allowed to do its work. Small habits repeated long enough slowly create a different life in a very natural way. Nothing loud, nothing showy, just steady and enduring. You may not apply all of them, and that's completely fine. All it takes is one habit that feels most natural to you, something small enough that starting doesn't feel heavy. Once it becomes familiar, you'll naturally know when it's time to add the next one. If this video gave you a new perspective, please like and subscribe to continue joining us for more content like this.